We're going to be talking about PLG today, and I think everyone who's on the call right now is, by definition, is curious. And everyone on the call right now, by definition right now, is courageous. And I want to say fearless, but I don't think that's true. I think we all have some fear. But the people on the call right now that are exploring PLG are people who embrace fear, step into the unknown. You know, PLG is pretty hot. It's pretty exciting, and not everything is figured out. I'm going to say two things that are contradictory. First of all, not everything is figured out. Like, there are people on this call who are going to know more about some things than either Ben or I. Ben and I are two people who've stepped into the unknown ourselves and taken some of the body blows and figured out some patterns of success, but not everything is figured out. So that's number one. Number two, some stuff is figured out, and that's what we want to show you today. Some stuff is figured out, and those patterns are patterns that we can take and run with. So what we're going to cover today is what is PLG very quickly, why does it work, kind of the theory, how does it work, what are some of the mechanics behind it, when and whether does it make sense for me. And let me just pause for 1 sec. So Winning by Design, as most of you know, is a revenue architecture firm that focuses on revenue architecture for recurring revenue business. And we have worked with dozens of unicorns who grew up with PLG as their primary GTM and then needed to add sales-led growth on top of that. They needed to add sales on top of. So think about Calendly, Asana, GitLab, Figma, Dropbox. These are all customers of Winning by Design who started with PLG and then added sales on top. Increasingly, and one of those customers, by the way, those partners that we partnered with was Sneak, where Ben was was the VP of product and head of all things PLG at Sneak. So started with actually, Ben will tell you they didn't really start with PLG. They started with free, and then they had to add PLG, and then they had some sales stuff on top of that. It's a longer story. But this managing multiple GTMs is a real thing, and we're going to talk about that today. Increasingly, both Ben and I are being approached by people who started with sales, with a sales-led or a marketing-led motion, and then want to add and then are saying, well, shoot, in my space, I've got competitors who are coming up through PLG, and I don't want to happen to me what happened to WebEx or GoToMeeting by Zoom, or what happened to Microsoft by Calendly or Slack. I don't want that to happen to me. So should I be adding an additional PLG motion to my business today? That's what we're talking about. All right. So what is PLG? Why does PLG work? How does PLG work? When and whether does it make sense for me? And then the meat of this conversation is going to be in number 5. And Ben's going to walk us through kind of how do you build PLG from the ground up? And again, we're thinking about in the context of we didn't start that way, but we want to add it. And then we're just going to wrap up with some critical success factors. And if we have time to have discussion at the end, that's fine. But we can have discussion at any time during this session. We've got 65 people on the line right now, but don't be shy. Like seriously, like if you have a question, the courageous people on the call right now are people who are intellectually engaged and curious and want to talk, and we want to hear. Like we want to hear your questions, we want to hear your challenges, and we may even you may even think that we're wrong at something, and you have a different perspective, and we want to hear that. All fair. The TLDR for this session: PLG is hot, definitely is. You basically can't turn around in Silicon Valley without hearing PLG, and we think that is now extended beyond Silicon Valley. It's not for everybody. If it is for you, it's serious. Like it's a buckle up type situation. It's like a 4-year investment, $4 million investment. $4 million may not sound like much. I mean, a lot of companies in their kind of growth stages and beyond can find $4 million under the couch cushions. But 4 years is a lot. And that next bullet is really painful. Your best and brightest people. Like, you actually have to put best and brightest on this. It's not a lot of people. It's a few of your best and brightest. And why are they working on this instead of on my core business? So we're going to talk about that. By the way, it's not 4 years till you see initial results. It's 4 years till you are confident that you're starting to see the scaling that you want. So if it's for you, buckle up. It's not an either or. We believe PLG and SLG can work together. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And we believe that the best companies going forward will be managing those two things together. So to get us started on what is PLG, this is the OpenView Partners definition. I really like it. I've played with a lot of different versions of this. But PLG is a growth model where product usage drives acquisition, retention, and expansion. Those are really, they did a great job at this definition. It's not just the product that drives it, it's the product usage that drives it. So when we think about that in the context of businesses, that we're familiar with, the typical way of thinking about kind of a sales and marketing led business is, I'm going to drive through awareness, education, and selection process. Then I'm going to get a commit, and then my customer is going to onboard and start achieving impact. Okay, so how does that change in a PLG model? How that changes is product usage is going to happen before a commit. So customers are going to be able to use and get benefit from my product even before they have to make any commitment, before purchase. So I want to ask you, what software products have you personally discovered? Put this in the chat. This will just be quick. Personally discovered, installed, and used without help from any other human. So I got Superhuman. What other products have you? Canva, perfect. Monday.com, love it. ChatGPT, yep. Whoop, Discord, Calendly, Turo, Miro, exactly. Notion. We didn't have salespeople selling these to us. We didn't have implementation people or customer success people helping us. And we didn't even have to sign a contract in many, certainly not a monetary contract. We had to do sign a license for kind of user permissions, but we didn't have to make a monetary commitment. And a lot of these products that you've mentioned, some are, installed as you're right, Anna Marie. Ana Manrique. I don't know if I said that right. We're not installing software, you're right. It's more like just provisioning or setting up an account. A lot of these are personal-ish things, but a lot of them are also enterprisey things. And before we had the acronym PLG, we were talking about the consumerization of enterprise software. So the expectations that we have about ease of use, like all the apps on your phone, all the apps on your smart TV, nobody helps you with that. So why do I have to get helped with an enterprise scale app? Well, over time, we're getting better and better making enterprise apps easy to find, easy to activate, easy to get value from. And that is PLG. Ana Manrique. Ana Manrique. We got it right. Amazing. Okay, so let's look at an example. This is in 2018, the video conferencing app market. It looks like we have a couple of winners and a cluster at the bottom and someone who's trying to jump from the bottom category to the top category. Probably not a surprise who that is. That is Zoom. Well, how did that happen? How did Zoom move from the bottom cluster to the top cluster, and why weren't WebEx and GoToMeeting paying attention? Well, one reason is it seems like a toy. Like, it was a free. And when it wasn't free, it was $15. So we sell to big corporations, giant enterprises. They are a toy. They're selling to schools and churches. We don't have to worry about it. In fact, they're giving it away to schools and churches. We don't have to worry about it. Well, that first portion of the journey, this one here, is not unfamiliar. We can look at some others that look like that too. GitLab, Canva, Atlassian. their first 4 years, 5 years look like that. And then all of a sudden, escape velocity, escape velocity, escape velocity. So one of the takeaways that you're going to hear us mention multiple times over the course of this is that it takes time to build a non-linear growth machine. We're going to talk about what linear versus nonlinear is, but it takes time. If you get it right, when you get it right, then nonlinear growth happens. But it's not like a sales-led model where in year one, you add X number of salespeople, you inherit their quota, they achieve at Y percentage of their quota. Year two, you double that, and then you essentially get double the quota and hopefully similar attainment, and therefore I have double, and then I triple, and then I have triple. That's linear. PLG is not linear for some reasons that we're going to talk about. So why does PLG work? And Ben, I know you can monitor the chat here because I can't while I'm talking, but if anyone wants to discuss any of this along the way, just put it in the chat. So why does PLG work? First of all, in that same bow tie that we showed you, it is self-service. And self-service is indeed the way that a lot of customers want to engage today. They actually want to do their own homework. They want to educate themselves. They want to try it out on their own and see if it works for free. They want to see if they can get to impact on their own, and then they want to scale as needed. They don't need someone, they don't believe they need someone whispering in their ear all along the way or helping them all along the way. And the easier, the more enterprise software gets consumerized, the more true that becomes. And our expectations are shifting. We're bringing expectations from our personal life into our business life, and PLG is facilitating that. Why it matters.
May I ask for your help? And this is always great for everybody to see how this goes. Can you do me a favor? Can you go click stop screen share?
Oh yeah, because I got to get it less blurry, huh?
Yeah.
Okay,
for those of you who know what this is, when you get this, when you have slides like this, this is presentation mode. If we now go into teacher mode, if Dave clicks stop share, he go into screen share advanced, picks a second camera. And then switches the source until he gets it right. You're going to see what he's going to do. He's now going to click advanced screen share. And now we can read the text.
Bueno. Thank you.
Bueno. For anybody who wants to know that this is a common, this is a very good trick to learn how to do this because most people are not familiar. If the camera doesn't go straight away to your screen share because you have multiple cameras, on the left upper corner, you can click a little button, and when you click that button in, it switches. So don't panic.
And the reason I'm using it that way is so that I could show a camera here, because we're using OBS in case you're interested. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jocko. Amazing. Okay, so the reason it matters for us is that the marginal cost of a marginal dollar of ARR can approach zero if the product is doing the work instead of human. So if the product is facilitating that awareness part of the journey, if the product is facilitating the education part of the journey, if the product is facilitating the actual selection and commit and onboarding and value, and we had to blend those categories because as you saw before, we're actually using it before commit. If the product's doing that work, I don't have to pay the product a salary, I don't have to pay the product a commission, and so and even for renewals and expansions, I don't have to pay the product for that work. So anywhere we can hire the product and delabor any of that process, we're actually moving our marginal cost of marginal dollars to zero. So the first reason why nonlinear growth is possible is because of marginal unit economics. The second reason why nonlinear growth is possible is because of reduced variability. So you think about a human-driven revenue machine, and you think about the pressure of a quota and the pressure of the end of a quarter, and you know that all sorts of creativity comes into play at the end of a quarter, either around deal terms or around use case. So think of the conversation like, hey, does your product do this? And you're like, well, gosh, yeah. I mean, I never really thought about it, but I guess it could do that. Sure, yeah, our product does that. And now all of a sudden I'm making commitments that the product wasn't designed to do, but I, as an individual quota carrier, believe that the product could do. And that's a whole set of promises that are going to now have to be delivered by my customer success org. and it's going to look like a different shape. It's almost like this deal is that shape, and this other deal is this other shape, and this other deal is this other shape. I might be doing discounts. I might be doing term adjustments. I might be doing bundling. And so variability is actually the enemy of scale. If the terms of the deal are all programmed into the software, then every deal is going to look the same. And that's going to be more stackable. Now, because I can hire the product to do this work, and because every unit of revenue is going to come through looking about the same, I actually can start small. So land and expand is a lot easier with product-led growth. I can start with a small footprint. I can start with one seat. I can start with one team, because I don't have to help a salesperson hit her quota with my initial deal. The product can do that. And then by definition, if I'm starting small, expansion is then going to build into growth. If you look at the cohorts here, if you just look at that bottom cohort, light blue, it's not that impressive. It doesn't grow that much. But if it's growing anything north of 0, then that's good. I don't dig a hole. I don't have to start in a hole with my next year. And my next year is the green, and my next year is the yellow, and those start to stack, and that starts to build compound growth. Any of that the product can do is great. And we're going to talk later about when and where and how a salesperson might show up to help continue to expand that account. But product-led growth allows us to start small and do a land and expand. Okay, cool. Anything from the chat we should know about yet, Ben?
No, I think we're on top of it.
All good? Okay, cool.
Yeah, all good.
All right, so how does this work? Like, let's say that I built, I'm thinking of building a product-led growth motion from scratch, whether I'm doing that for a from-scratch company or whether I'm doing that from scratch within an existing company. There's some key principles that we want to pay attention to. Number 1, empathy. And this is with no irony whatsoever. Empathy, like caring. Like actually caring for the end user, not the budget holder, not the deal approver. I mean, we those of us who grew up through sales, we're all trained to go find the person with budget, find the person with decision-making power. And then a lot of those of us who built product in sales-led organizations had to build product that would then appeal to the budget holder or the decision maker. So we're building things in like multi-tiered access and configurable reporting and enterprise-grade security. End user doesn't care about those things. So now we're going to flip our mindset and say, well, what does the end user care about? What does the end user care about? How does she approach her life? We're going to talk some more about this in a minute. Number 2, generosity. Now that we know how she thinks about her life and her challenges and how she wants to make progress against the jobs that she has to get done, we're going to help her do that. We're going to be generous. And 3rd, because we don't have any humans in the room, it's very hard to get feedback on how that's going. So we're going to instrument the product so that we can get feedback. Where's she getting stuck? What's working for her? What's not working for her? Which functionality is she accessing? Which functionality is she not accessing? And a lot of the ideas that we have when we build a product don't end up playing out exactly the way we thought they would. So we need instrumentation to tell us what needs to be fixed and how we can move friction out of that. Okay, so empathy, generosity, instrumentation. So you may be thinking now, well, would any of this work for me in my business? Like, I might have built my business in a different way. Maybe my product's built in a different way. Maybe a lot of what Dave just said about, building for the decision maker and the budget holder is exactly how I think about my business. And I'm not actually sure how well we know our end user, but would it make sense? Would we want to do this? So I'm going to hand off to Ben here. And I think we want to flip this question a little bit and say, when would it not make sense? Yeah. So I'm going to hand over to you, Ben, and either in the chat or just unmute yourself. When would PLG maybe not make sense?
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Drop some answers in the chat. We'll give you 30 seconds or so. No, just the first things that come to your mind. Don't be shy. Small niche market like that. Super complex product that cannot be self-served. When a sales culture will not embrace the model. Big install effort, new category, These are good.
Yeah, these are good, right?
High ticket service business. When your org is aligned on it or not aligned on it when it wouldn't make sense, right? Highly regulated market, long time to see impact, yeah, maybe. Alignment, yeah, seeing alignment a few times. Enterprise customer that requires a lot of customization. These are good. Let's take a look at a few of the things that we came up with about when it does make sense. Great. So these are a few of the things that, I think we expect to be in place to make PLG viable. So for any of this to work, we need to make sure we get the product to a place that it's really solid. And what I mean by that is, first and foremost, it is solving real user pain in an effective way. So going back to what Dave said, like, not the buyer, we're focusing on the user. It's solving real user pain in an effective way in a market that is willing to pay for that pain to be solved. And your product needs to allow users and potential customers to experience the core value without any human assistance. And it needs to do so in a way that is by choice, right? Not something that's mandated. But what I will say, just in caveat there, though, is that even if your product doesn't meet these bars yet, that's okay, so long as you can see a viable path to get there. I think the next thing to check off is, whether the product can be adopted by end users directly. Some products, they require mass adoption at the business unit level or at the company level. The kinds of products like think Workday, Carter, NetSuite, those types of products, for the most part, they're going to be blocked from PLG. Though it is my belief that, I think they'll still need to kind of change a few things and start to become product-led in their approach to retention, right? How they keep users through exceptional UX, or eventually I think they're going to be disrupted by other players who come in and start to provide the same value, but packaged in a way that users love to use, right? I think that's just inevitable. The next thing is something that I think is often overlooked, and you need to have repeatability and predictability in your go-to-market motion. And if you don't, if your current go-to-market isn't repeatable, if it's not predictable, now's not the time to be layering on more motions, right? And I think this is really just validation of the first point. Are you solving a problem in a way that the market is willing to pay you to solve? Have you proven that that's repeatable? And last but not least, PLG is a company-wide commitment. So many answers in the chat there that talked about alignment, right? Your company is going to look and behave differently after it adopts PLG. This PLG transformation, whatever you want to call it, it will touch and change pretty much every function. And it is going to take you significant time and effort to get there. Dave talked about 4 years, 3-4 years. It's multi-year. You need commitment to invest in dedicated resources, a strong product culture, building out a robust data platform, and more. If you don't have, complete exec level buy-in and sponsorship to execute, then focus on getting that first. Nothing else is going to work until you've got that. Next slide, Dave. Okay, so we've got all the ingredients we need. What's next? Well, I think this is really the heart of our conversation. We're going to talk about some really important steps in a high-level approach. And if you take, I think, nothing else from today, then it should be these things, right? And none of these things are trivial. Okay, I want to really kind of emphasize that, which is why number one is reinforcing what we just talked about: executive commitment. Your PLG efforts are, I think they will be doomed if you try to launch them in the same way that you might launch a project within an individual function. Now, you can't treat this just like you would a new product initiative or a new marketing or sales initiative. You're going to need product and engineering and marketing and sales and finance and ops, etc., all on the same page. And the only place that really typically all comes together is in the exec team, right? So I'll stop banging that drum for a moment and talk about what else you'll need.
Sure you will, Ben.
So I might come back to it.
I think you will.
Don't hold me to that. So for a new PLG initiative within a traditionally sales-led company, you're going to need to build out a team for this. And not just any team, but a team of A players, right? Dave said it before, I think your best talent. And you have to insulate them. You have to insulate them so you can protect them from anything that could distract and detract from their mission. Now, this is a team that has to be maniacally focused on providing end user value, a very different model to kind of let's market and cater to the needs of the buyer. This is a team that flips that on its head and really focuses on end user value, making sure that's there and connecting users to that value. End user value is so important, not value for the buyer. Everything else is built around this with PLG. See, you have to nail this, but it's going to take time, probably more time than you think. I don't know everyone's kind of reactions when you saw Dave's kind of talking about 4 years there. It's a long time. Maybe it's shorter than that. Maybe it's a bit more. There's some examples we'll talk about later, and it depends where you're starting from, of course. But the point is, expect many, many iterations over multiple years. Remember that executive commitment, right? This is where it needs to be unwavering. It's all very well, yes, let's do this, but after a year, after 2 years, not quite got those kind of ARR results that are meaningful yet in context of the existing revenue pool for the business. It's coming, but again, patience and commitment. That doesn't mean, of course, even though it will take a long time to get to kind of really meaningful ARR in the context of the overall business, that you don't have some earlier signals, right? You're going to have signals about how it's going to work out, but ARR shouldn't be that signal for quite a while. Probably not during the first 18 to 24 months even. But there are other things that you'll need to measure to kind of help stay on track. Next slide, please, Dave. So enjoy this, folks. It's a rare picture of me in a suit. It doesn't happen very often, but here it is. So while I was at Sneak, one of the groups I led was responsible for executing our PLG strategy. Now, in my experience, teams that are focused on building or optimizing PLG motions, they need to be full stack teams. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by a full stack team? So remember why they're there, right? We need to empower PLG teams to create, to evolve, to optimize product experiences, to drive customer acquisition, retention, and expansion. Remember that PLG definition. And because they're working across the entire user and customer lifecycle, PLG teams, they need to be truly cross-functional. So the core of a product team that you're all familiar with, right, includes product managers, developers, and designers, that, holy trinity. But PLG teams, that's not where it stops. They should also include decision scientists, data scientists. They should also include marketing managers. Balanced teams like this, what they bring is, a broader toolbox for innovation and experimentation across the entire life cycle, as well as a broader palette of creative ideas. And I said life cycle there. I think that's an important concept. In fact, one of the PLG team at Sneak, it went through a few different name iterations, but one of those was the life cycle team, right? And that talked to the fact that, It really catered across, end to end, from original awareness all the way through to monetization and expansion. And as we talked about, teams that are entrusted to pilot PLG initiatives, they need to be protected from being pulled into other work. They can't be part-timers who have other core responsibilities. It's just not going to work. I've seen that, and I've seen it kind of end with tears. So, a team of people dedicated to this over multiple years. It's that commitment, right?
Hey, Ben, we got a question in the chat. Why not a salesperson on this team who could then be
such a great
feedback.
question.
Yeah,
that is such a great question. I love it. And I love having a salesperson in this team to get started from a product perspective, to get to the point where the product is doing some of that heavy lifting itself. This is what you're going to need in the team. There's going to be a point where you get there and you can start to then kind of leverage what the product is doing to augment that with, human contact at the right time, when the right product usage signals are seen within your ICP. You're combining this bunch of data, firmographic data, product usage data, use case data, and so on, to inform the sales motion, so that the sellers can kind of connect some of the dots that they're seeing in product usage and help kind of start to facilitate lands that are of higher value than we could probably expect during the self-serve motion. So absolutely, at some point, a salesperson should be involved in this team. Good shout.
And then another question: can a data scientist or a marketer, the ones on this slide, be shared across one or two PLG squads?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. At Sneak, in fact, in the PLG org, we had at its largest, it was 4 teams, and the data scientist, decision scientist, was shared across all 4 of those teams. We did have individual growth marketers in each of the teams. I think the growth marketing one's interesting because, there are specialist focuses there that make it sometimes easier just to have a dedicated person there. In a team that we were focused on some of the kind of new user acquisition initiatives, we had someone with SEO experience there. It was a big growth loop for Sneak. Similarly, in the team focused on activation and engagement and really trying to kind of get users to value and keep them there, we had a life cycle marketer. So there were different specializations that made it more suitable, I think, for those growth marketers to be paired directly with a team in a full-time responsibility. But decision science, data science was one that was shared. Yeah, I think you've got a little bit of leeway there. I think the key thing is that whoever is in that group, and I do recommend you actually start small with one team, not multiple teams, but whoever is in that group overall focused on PLG needs to be isolated from the rest of the business, right? Again, when I'll just talk a little bit about what it was like when I joined Sneak. The teams who were nominally responsible for growth, they were part of the core R&D organization. So there was a team that owned some of the onboarding capabilities. That team was constantly being pulled into other customer work. A big customer, a new contract was coming up. They needed feature X, Y, and Z. Right. Okay. Who's free? Who can we get to do this? Well, okay, pause that onboarding stuff. Let's just focus on this feature. And so, they were subservient to the needs of the next largest paying customer. You have to get them out of that. You have to kind of ring fence them, get them isolated in a manner that allows them to focus on this initiative.
So Ben, I'm going to keep us moving because I know you've got a lot to cover. There is a question I think we'll want to hit on the timeline slide, which is how do you keep executive commitment even against a multi-year timeline? But I think we hit that maybe on a future slide.
Yep, sure thing.
Cool.
Great. Yeah, next slide. Thanks, Dave. Okay, so once you've got your core team in place, I've found it pretty essential to help guide their work by putting in place a set of guiding principles for their day-to-day. Now, when I brainstormed with the PLG team at Sneak, these were the 6 core principles that we came up with. So number 1, know the user. This was, I think, related to that principle, that first principle that Dave talked about, empathy, right? So know the user was about being empathetic and curious about our users, their motivations, the problems they were facing, their behavior. So really important. Number 2, focus on value. This was about knowing that, our path to monetization follows our users' path to value, right? Think about that. Our path to monetization follows our users' path to value. So it was a constant reminder for us to focus on the latter. When we focus on the latter, we knew the former would come. Number 3, optimize for learning. So this helped us focus on fast learning and sharing insights to, de-risk and up-level everyone. Number 4, test to invest. This reminded us to validate through minimum viable experimentation before we kind of considered any kind of deeper investment. It was like, what's the fastest, cheapest way we can test something to get confidence before we go deeper? Number 5, data over opinion. This one helped us ensure that we'd use data rigorously to inform decisions whenever possible. And number 6, progress over perfection. So this one, it guided us to, I think, iterate on the simplest thing that might work in the service of delivering compound improvements over time. Now, the principles that you might arrive at in terms of your own PLG team, they might well differ, but, in my eyes, these are a really good starting point. Next slide, please, Dave. Okay. So you've got the team. Great. They're ring-fenced, dedicated to PLG. Fantastic so far. They've got a strong set of guiding principles. Things are looking good. What's next? So now we're ready to do some discovery. Now it's important to understand your ideal customer profile. It's important that you're able to confidently answer questions like these about the segment of the market that you're going to serve with this PLG motion, which may or may not be different, right, from the market you're currently serving. In many cases, it will be the same. In many cases, it will be a subset of the market. In other cases, it will be an adjacent market. In other cases, it will be kind of down market from where you are. But it's important to be able to answer these questions. It's important to understand your ICP. But, and next slide, please, Dave. While ICP is important, remember that principle, focus on the user. While ICP is important, getting into the minds of your users with a jobs to be done perspective, that's incredibly important. So our product is going to be used by people, by humans. We need to understand them. Like, who is she? What are her priorities? How does she experience her problems and challenges? Why, when, and where does she want to hire a solution to solve those problems? What alternatives does she consider when trying to find a solution? How does she go about trying to find a solution? It's that user perspective, that is what we really need. It's at the core of one of those first principles of PLG that Dave talked to earlier, empathy. You have to build deep and evolving empathy with your users and potential customers if you hope to build something that resonates with them, something that they, again, choose to use and love to use. And when you have that empathy and understanding, then, it's all about iterating and testing with real users in your target market to get to a point where you can launch some kind of MVP. Okay, so shift gears a little bit now and talk about kind of the timeline and measurement. So we've talked about how it's going to take multiple years before you're going to see ARR show up in a way that is, actually moving the needle for your company. But along the way, you're going to be watching for other things. You're going to see things that will tell you what's working. You're going to see things that will tell you what's not working. So the key is to kind of make sure you're paying attention to the right things at the right time. And that's what we're showing you here. And this, there is that first principle of instrumentation. There is a bunch of kind of lower level micro signals that you're going to be looking at along the way, but just taking a step back and looking at the macro picture here. We touched on discovery, and the importance of building that deep empathy with the user and our jobs to be done, and how you might use that to, iterate your way to an MVP. And once you launch, you're going to continue to rapidly iterate. You're not just getting that MVP in place, launching and stopping. You're going to continue to rapidly iterate. It's going to be fast cycles. It's going to be with an immediate focus on getting to product market fit with the offering. Now, depending on, again, where you're starting from with your current product and which market you're serving now, this may be shorter, it may be longer, but with this motion, you've got to really try and think of this as a new initiative to get to product market fit. And we're going to click into this in the next few slides, but what we're really looking for here is strong usage-based retention here, right? You have to get users to value. You have to get them to build habits around the value that solves a real pain for them. If you nail that, then you can be confident that you can bring more users into the product and help them be successful too. But that can't be the focus right now. The focus right now needs to be on getting to prove that that value is strong enough that users want to keep coming back because your product solves it well. And then after that, you're going to be looking at go-to-market fit. And the objective here is to, prove a path to strong unit economics. There's some assumptions you'll make here, right? Because you likely don't know your lifetime value. Not even, your lifetime period in this motion, particularly if it's a slightly different market than your traditional existing product. But you can make some assumptions, and you can focus on finding and building out product-led acquisition channels that make that unit economics ratio favorable. And then we shift to monetization, and that phase where your objective really is to optimize conversion across the full funnel. So you're going to need to focus on the journey of the user and their team from their first touch point to signing up for your free plan or free trial, to becoming a paying customer, to expanding their usage and contract value with you over time. And you're going to be looking at that through the lens of the self-serve revenue channel, if that's something you're standing up, but potentially also through the lens of product-led sales, where you're kind of driving those sales workflows that I touched on earlier, based on product usage data. And you'll measure that through funnel analysis and conversion rates, but you'll also start to see validation in the unit economics at that point. And from there, it's about scaling, extending growth loops, finding new growth loops, layering those on. So where your objective there is really, it's building, and it's not kind of looking for a specific value, but it's building and maintaining healthy rates of growth. Okay.
So Ben, before we go to the next slide, two things to cover, and I know we got to keep moving, but one is, how do I keep my executives' attention when, you're showing me almost no movement on that, this y-axis, almost no movement in the first year. And then you're saying that this movement in the second year may still not register versus the core business where I'm really focused on hitting my numbers. That's question one. How do I keep executives' attention?
Yeah. So two things. One is setting the right expectation of this up front. So this isn't a surprise. You are going to have a lot of trouble if the commitment you've sought from the exec team, if you don't have that buy-in and they imagine this to be a much faster exercise that produces very quick, significant ROI. So the first thing is just making sure those expectations are set appropriately such that this isn't a surprise. The second thing is, over communication. And when I say over communication, I've got a phrase that I learned from one of my former product mentors, but repetition never spoiled the prayer, right? And it is continuous evangelism of what you're doing, the visibility into the quality of life improvements that you are providing for the users, and the extrapolation of some of those in a narrative that helps kind of tell the story about this being the right thing to do. That's ultimately the what you have to do. But again, you know, Dave, you had a great chat with was it Kip from
from HubSpot?
HubSpot?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, their journey, I know you'll talk about that in a little while. They had to, you know, it was they had strong belief in it, and it was unwavering belief. You know, you need to get to that position.
I love your point.
Find the opportunities just find the opportunities along the way to kind of demonstrate progress. It might not be revenue progress, but it's going to be some progress that is tangible. Those are important things to do. But if you skipped on the earlier part of kind of getting that unwavering commitment, then it's going to be difficult. Amazing.
Okay. Second question is there, let's say I'm an existing company, I already have a product. Is there anything leverageable that's going to help me accelerate this time frame?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you've got an existing product with strong product market fit, and when I say strong product market fit, if it's through a sales-led motion, I don't necessarily mean something that is measured in revenue terms and repeatable revenue, because there are countless examples of products out there that commercially are very strong, but from the perspective of creating immense user value rather than just kind of organizational value, in terms of creating immense user value and doing so in a way that users love and want to use, they are poor, right? So getting to a point where you have real confidence that your product itself is working well as a means of retention, if your users are not mandated to use it, is really important. So if you've got a good product with strong product market fit demonstrated like that, then I think, you know, some of this early stage can absolutely be accelerated for sure.
So we've got about 7 minutes, and we could listen to you all day, Ben, but we're not going to get to. So I don't know what decisions you want to make about the next slides. I'll follow your lead.
I think I can probably rattle through a few of them, and I think there's some.
Okay.
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay, great.
Okay. So I think it riffs on that last topic, this one. So, you know, in product-led companies, usage retention, it's the primary leading indicator of revenue retention. But meaningful long-term usage retention analysis in B2B SaaS, you know, it's typically in the region of 6 to 12 months, right? So generally, that's still too much of a lagging indicator to be something useful that you should directly optimize. Next slide, Dave.
Yeah. So
if retention is, if it's too lagging to meaningfully guide you, what should you be focused on instead? Well, my experience, it's useful to think of retention in the context of a user state model. And I wrote a little bit about this on one of my newsletter posts recently. But in essence, you activate new users to get them into an engaged state. You invest in keeping them engaged. Some users are going to inevitably stop using your product. They'll churn or basically go dormant. And at the right time, you can also choose to, you know, focus on resurrecting those users. So by definition, an engaged user is a retained user. So with that framework in mind, and next slide, please, Dave. We can model this really by describing retention as a function of our efforts to activate, engage, and resurrect users. But typically, and almost always earlier on in your journey with PLG product, your highest point of leverage is going to be in improving activation. Next slide, Dave, thanks. Sorry, one back. Yeah. So you can absolutely do things to keep users engaged, but at its core, once users have experienced the value of your product, what keeps them coming back is that it solved their pain in an effective and elegant way. And you need to keep iterating to improve that. But assuming you have a solid base there, you also need to focus on connecting new users and their teams to value. If users and teams are dropping off before they get to experience the value, then it stands to reason that they're unlikely to keep coming back. And the process of getting users to experience the value and build habits around it is how we define activation. And so activation, therefore, is the primary leading indicator of usage-based retention, which is, of course, the primary leading indicator of dollar retention. And we validate and refine our definition of activation over time, with regressions that prove correlation with improved long-term usage retention, and we run experiments to then prove causation. But in the early days, if you don't have enough historical data like that, speaking with, observing users, just being close to them, that should lead you to a great starting point. So credit to kind of Reforge for this framework, this setup aha habit framework. It's the most useful way I've found to think about and model activation. And to give a very quick overview of it, you define setup as the steps your users or their teams will need to take in order to get to the point that they can experience the core value of your product. The aha moment is when they first experience that core value. And the habit moment is when they build a habit around the core value. So in B2B SaaS, you'll almost always want your activation, engagement, and retention metrics to be team-based instead of individual user-based. And you'll still drive behavior at the end user level, but ultimately what you're trying to influence is aggregate level behavior across a team and a company, as that's what you're going to be monetizing. So on the next slide, I talk a little bit about what this looked like at Sneak. And setup involved 3 steps. So I'll whiz through this because it's coming up towards the end. But first, the team connecting an integration, connecting Sneak to their GitHub account. Second, importing a project. Third, they'd seen some non-empty project list. Aha moment, they'd seen details of a vulnerability. And the habit moment was they'd taken action to fix a vulnerability. And we defined retention as whether the team was still using Sneak to fix issues that we'd found. Our usage-based retention curve flattened out somewhere between 12 and 15 weeks. And so we kind of modeled activation based on correlation with week 15 retention. I was going to just ask you to kind of guess what some of the numbers were here, but I'll in the interest of time, I'll skip over that and just kind of highlight this. Nearly 50% of teams that reached that activation habit moment were still retained 15 weeks after sign up. Contrast that to only 3% of teams that didn't activate. So that should tell you everything you need to know about the importance of defining activation and focusing on it from a retention perspective. Okay, Dave, I'll stop there. I know
cool.
kind of
so a lot of energy. I'm going to try to do this in 2 minutes. A lot of energy around this timeline. And AJ, you asked about, well, what about a private equity firm that's got a holding period of 4 to 5 years? I don't have 4 years. This is not an either or. PLG and SLG is not an either or. We have been talking about this as adding PLG as a full-fledged GTM, which is in fact going to take you a year of discovery and iteration towards a minimum viable product and product market fit minimum. And then from there, you're going to build the flywheel. And so it's going to be year 2, year 3, year 4 before you start seeing ARR. But if you don't want to go all the way there, there are other options. We can do a sidecar product. You probably remember MuleSoft. They developed a sidecar product around the Salesforce data loader. It was adjacent to their core value, but it wasn't their core value, and it was easily accessible by a sales ops professional. Super solved their problem getting data out of Salesforce and went viral, and then was an on-ramp into the MuleSoft product. So we can do that. We can also go after specific pieces of the journey. So a lot of the principles that we heard from Ben around real, data, not opinion, and iteration and empathy for the end user, those can help us with our onboarding process, with our renewal process, with our upgrading process, with our expansion process. Like if we have a product that you literally have to call a human in order to buy more of it, that's friction. And we may say, well, we want that friction because we want to talk to that customer because we think we can talk them into more. Okay, fine. But if we don't want that friction, we can take it out and we can employ these same kind of principles in a way that's not the kind of 4 to 5 year horizon. All of these companies on this page have sales teams, and they all have PLG motions. In fact, the sales headcount in these companies ranges from 9 to 29%. So not insignificant sales teams, but also famous for having built out a PLG motion. And that includes Atlassian. Atlassian started with no sales team. They got to $100 million before they added a salesperson, and they still require each customer to start in the product before they can talk to a salesperson, but they started with PLG. What about someone who didn't start with PLG? Here's HubSpot. They added PLG at the $100 million mark. And Ben already indicated how they did that. They carved out a team, separate team, 10 people, sponsored by the CEO, fully protected. They did not want to pull that PLG motion back into the core business before it had its legs under it. So they waited for 3 years. It stayed under 15 people for 3 years. In 3 years, and this is where, you know, Steve, and your question about can I get some benefit from already having, you know, some market presence, they got to $10 million in 3 years. At that point, they pulled it back in, and then the core business started learning from the spun out business. Another example that we're writing about it in a book, and you'll see more about, is MongoDB. A bunch of examples of these doing both. So guys, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's see. Let me do that a little differently. Really appreciate you joining, and we will follow up with the slides and see you out in the market. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Sure you'll be amazed. Big fun to be had by everyone. It's up to you. Sure they can be done. Young and old are doing it, I'm told. Just one try and you too will be sold. It's called a freak. They're doing it night and day. Allow us, we'll show you the way. Oh, freak out. You freak, says she. Down, has your head spinning all around. Feel the rhythm, chant the rhyme. Come on along and have a real good time. Like the days of stomping as a boy. Now we're free. Oh, what a joy! Just come on down to the 5th floor. Find a spot out on the floor.
Hey, JC, I'm just removing people, but I'm happy to chat with you. What's going on, James?
Life is good, man.
Awesome.
Things are going really great. You and I should get 5 minutes. Is it just us?
Almost. I'm removing people one at a time because I was going to chat with Ben.
I'm still here, but I actually need to bounce and go
and
do the whole dad thing. So.
Oh yeah, cool. No worries. Hey Ben, thank you so much. I got good. There's good comments you saw in the chat. I was getting some slacks too.
Yeah, I didn't quite get the timing right. Sorry about that. But
no worries. I think we. Oh, did I just remove James?
I think you removed JC by accident.
I was being too. All right. Well, go be a dad. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
That was amazing. Thanks for your help on that.
Take care. All the best.
Now free. Down.